so excited to have Annie on the podcast today. I'm just so like pumped to hear your story because I know little bits and pieces of what you do, and that's why I asked you to come on, because you have so many different things you do. Between like we're literally in one of your Airbnbs right now.
That's
interior design. That's kind of how we met, and then like the whole showbiz of New York.
Yeah, yeah, or wherever,
wherever the wind takes you.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm excited to hear like more of the story, because I know little bits and pieces. I know you have been in all those worlds, but I want to know how you got there. What sort of inspires you, what your, like the background leading up to all those things was, and then what your passions are moving forward.
Okay.
That's a lot. Okay. A
no, not a lot. Well, we were just talking about this a bit earlier, and I surprised myself in saying this, but I was like, maybe this is a good summary, even if totally self-deprecating, because that's the phase I'm in at the moment. I grew up acting, or just performing in general. I've been in like dance companies or shows since this is every actor on the planet. I feel like there are two categories of actors. Ones who've been like, when did you start? And they were like, when I was 9, I was in my first, whatever. Or people who are like, I don't know, I was in finance, and then I just decided to do something new at 40 and got a lead in an HBO show. Like, it seems to be the two stereotypes to me. Yeah. And I'm the child actor type, and I was Annie and this other boasting thing. Like I was this is totally politically incorrect, but I was Dorothy in The Wiz, not The Wizard of Oz, but The Wiz. It was double cast, and the other girl was the correct demographic. I was not, but those were my first. I mean, I really kind of went in strong as a kid, and then stayed with dance companies, stayed with acting, went to school for musical theater. Then like dropped out and like trekked the Yukon and stuff, and just had my utter Gemini nonsense, and because I grew up in Chicago, but went to a super badass summer camp. Like it was based in canoe tripping, and hormones, lots of teenage everything, but the canoe groups were not co-ed. So you had like this group of girls, and it was very cultish. So like, how dare you not come back next year? Like, absolutely. And it was 8 weeks of every summer. So straight up like 2 months.
Wait, like the whole summer?
The whole summer. And back when summer camp was not expensive, it was actually like less expensive to send your kids away, probably.
To take care of them.
Yeah. And people who I went to camp with are accomplished outdoorsmen, and we started at like 10. Yeah. I didn't have a summer in the States, like 4th of July. What even is that? Yeah.
Right.
Because I was like in Europe with singing, and then like at summer camp, just at Canada Day.
The summer camp was in Canada.
Yeah, in Ontario. So I dropped out my junior year of theater school, and after trekking in the Yukon for 3 months in the summer, I was like 20 maybe, and then spent like a couple years in like my hippie realm of like just road tripping around the States. Like, how could I not just visit my friends from the Yukon, the 10 people I just spent, 3 months in the wilderness with, or whatever. And then went to the hippiest college on the planet, says like actual Forbes or whatever. That was Evergreen.
Oh, I don't even know.
See,
is it in California?
It competes with California. Oh. You either make up a program yourself,
really,
so you essentially make up your major. You make it, it's whatever that is, and you can do internships and stuff like that.
So like making up your major, I'm like really curious about that, because that's like very non-traditional education-wise.
Well, what's funny is that my high school was huge. It had something that they called senior studies, which as a senior, you would have the second half of the day, you do your requirements by the state at the beginning, gym, math, whatever. And then this after lunch was this sort of pod style learning, which at the time was kind of new age. And I mean, there's the Waldorf, there's the Montessori, there's these things, but this was sort of the public school version of something interesting. That for me was chorus line. I directed, choreographed, cast a chorus line, which is what I'd be like, wow, that's where and most people are doing the things that they kind of predicted they wanted to do. Yeah.
That's really interesting.
A good friend of mine did a fashion show, and she's like the head designer for Patagonia and then Nike.
Wow.
And all these things, but she just came to mind. We were
so some
in touch
successful
recently.
people came out of that school.
Oh, it's actually a handicap. Most people are like, oh, that was I'm going to be a whole new person. And you're like, oh, I can't be. There's 6 people from my high school in this audience in this random venue in any town. Yeah.
Wow. So it puts the pressure on.
They spread far and wide. Yeah, it's hard to leave the past behind. But
I wonder why more schools aren't like that, though, with like a little bit more independence given to the student.
It was new. It was new at the time, but I feel like pod learning is a thing. And it was coincidence I ended up at Evergreen because I then went to Ecuador and Peru, and I got lost in the jungle.
This is out of
that's
high
like
school?
another one. This is between musical theater and Evergreen.
Okay.
Was a couple of years of just like I grew up knowing Spanish.
Wow.
My mom lived in Guatemala with her first life. I don't know.
So when you were like in South America, how old were you? That was before college, or
21?
Wow.
And 22.
And so you had like traveled Europe, traveled like the United States continent, and traveled over South America. Like you had traveled a lot.
I've not been to Antarctica.
Is that the only place?
But it is. But
wow.
But I also just South America felt like it's my style of dancing that I most love. Like funny that with a boyfriend at the time, I was teaching dance in Ecuador, like accidentally.
Wow.
And I think all these tourists from like Texas would show up for these dance lessons, and they'd be like really disappointed that there's like a blonde American teaching salsa or whatever. But and like merengue and bachata, I was in a samba troupe, which was great.
It's just broadened the whole range of things that I knew
Brazil.
You did already. Now it's like, whoa, dance too.
Those few years were really, I think, 04 to 09 was just like aimless. I lived so many places. I was like a ski instructor in Park City because I went there to work for Sundance, because that's totally a job you should do if you're vagabonding. Totally a job you should do. Sundance just needs staff. And so you get your Sundance jacket, you get Sundance and all these things. And I worked for them for a month and then probably fell for a boy. Yeah. An Australian named Damien. What a dream. And he was like, let's go live in London. Anyway, so I stayed as a ski instructor. I had skied 2 days in my life, but a dancer can fake it. And they hired me as a ski instructor.
What?
In like the biggest mountain in the country. Yeah.
Oh, I was terrified.
You're an actor, you're a dancer and an actor. You're like, I'm gonna make this work, and people dug it and got down safely. And I was like, no blacks for us. This is beginning. I won't show you double blacks yet.
I only do that in my free time.
Yeah. So I only heli ski every now and then.
Yes. On what you've told so far, leading up to 20, you had traveled a lot. Personally, when I was 20. I've been around the U.S. a little bit. But like probably I'd only traveled once or twice on my own. Yeah. And so I'm curious how you think that shapes a person to have that exposure to like cultures and different experiences, different foods, all these different things.
There's something too about, the nature nurture. Okay, that's usually used in a different way. But in this case, I'll say nature nurture is that the nature is your family environment, and the nurture is actually going and doing,
the influences
nature, like at home, nature versus, I know that's not how it's usually used, but you can't tell what you would have learned or not, I guess.
Right.
But like, I wouldn't be, I don't think that different of a person had I not been to this place, this place, this place. And like, I'm self-deprecating about it because like girl has overdone this.
So like the nature versus nurture that you were saying, like, were you kind of like raised in an environment where travel were you raised, obviously like you were very young when you were traveling, so I'm assuming your mom was into traveling.
Well, my mom and her first husband, she and her first husband had lived in Guatemala. And she was from LA, is from LA. She was raised in Culver City, but not by, as far as like the aspect of traveling places goes, she was raised by a carpenter who'd, I think stationed in Alaska during the war, and her mom's family is from Missouri. Like, not a lot of people back then were well traveled. I mean, it's like not what the world was providing. But my mom was really eager to live a different life than how she was raised. So that's the other version of like, that would be nurture. And she first to go to college. She left high school early, and then she was maybe a dancer in New Mexico, ran a jazz club in San Francisco. Then hitchhiked to Guatemala. When they came back to the States, they went to Milwaukee. Okay. He did not take well to being back. And it was just a lot of, there's no way he's in touch, so I can just out all the things that he, just got in a lot of, it was like, he kind of lost it. Yeah. And mom was like, I want a regular life. Like, this is not for me. And regular life, I don't know what that ever means, but then she met my dad, who was from Milwaukee also. So that's his side of the family. Which is how we ended up in Chicago.
Gotcha.
His name was Doug, and she's like, last I heard from Doug, because I just kind of left in the middle of the night, you know, when someone's on a lot of substances, you're like, I'm just gonna,
Yeah.
and he just sent their wedding wine. I don't know, I'm laughing, it's just ridiculous. He smashed up their wedding wine glasses and sent them to my grandparents in Culver City in a grape nuts box. Like, you left me, and it was like, that's all you heard from Doug. Yep.
Yeah.
But very passionate. And
Yeah. Had to be
wildlife
dramatic.
in Guatemala. Yeah. So anyway, so then we're in Evanston. I think something that I want to find the right word, because regret isn't it, but something that I wish I had that others still have is the joie de vivre of, you know what, I don't know how to phrase this, because I love the little things. I you know, I write a lot of poetry. I'm really into all the little things that one can notice in life, and I'm really emotional about them and all the things. But there's a lot that I'm like over, that I wish I wasn't. You know, like I've been there, done that mentality that is frustrating. That is like, you know, I hope not belittling to other people around, you know, something. But like, I saw this at a shop. There was a national park book of postcards that was like a meh. It was like, that waterfall's cute. Like that
like
cliff's like.
I've heard this concept of like, I don't know where I heard it. I wish I could quote it, but it was just like talking about how like if you could go back and reread your favorite book, like who wouldn't want to do that? Is that kind of what you're referencing? Like you wish you could see it.
My attention span doesn't let me read that much.
Oh, really?
But there is
like
one book.
Reader.
Yeah. So, but I could play readers in a movie. But I write a ton. I don't know where it comes from.
Well, it's very similar.
Really good grammar.
Thought process to write as it is to interpret.
Totally.
Written.
I'd like rather write than read. That's very narcissistic. I'd rather tell you all about my perspective than read anyone else's. Somebody gave me The Drifters by James Michener while I was traveling a lot in exactly that time in Ecuador and Peru, and I thought it was the best book ever. I wanted to give it to so many people. I passed it on with like notes, all these things. And I love any concept where the audience knows the story of how the characters intertwine before they do. And it was each chapter was dedicated to a different person. And I ended up living in Cusco, Peru for like a chunk of time, waiting tables. And it's a mecca for all kinds of travelers because it's Machu Picchu. So it's this weird melting pot of like house I lived in was like, you know, a Swede, an Argentine, a Peruvian, an Ecuadorian, a Spaniard, like, you know, a Canadian, me, and my friend Jillian, who's still a best friend.
What's like the typical reason that like when you meet people traveling abroad, is it just like they're soul searching? Or is there usually
there's an interesting, this is, to make this beyond just my opinion or memory, is that there are definitely two factual phases, which are, well, three. Of course, in the US, people travel when they have like that, their, you know, junior year, you can study abroad. I feel like college is honestly like kind of on its way out as like a way that you need to do things these days, but hopefully not for the reasons you should keep it, you know, like more vocational stuff. But
if you're going to become a doctor, I hope you go to college. But if you want to go into the arts or something.
Well, and it used to be the push in my years, it used to be the push was to expand educational institutions to include those things. Yeah. And then I almost feel like people are learning that it just didn't quite work. Like not a lot of people justified paying off their loans.
When you get out of college, what is really valued is experience. And I think college gives you a lot of hypothetical concepts about how it's applied, but it doesn't give you that hands-on approach. And often a lot of people go to college and then come out and realize that is not what they want to commit the next 40 years of their life to.
For sure.
And I think if you don't have that burden of like $100,000 in debt, you have a little bit more freedom to just try things and experiment and see what really floats your boat, or maybe be an entrepreneur or something.
Well, and the tie-in, the tie back is that in Australia, where it's much more common to go to college anytime, because the idea that you'd have to go before you actually feel it, because it's more of a social construct, is where people rack up debt that they wouldn't otherwise, you know, want to have, because there really isn't more than a vocational. I could be totally wrong by now, but there was a long time when I was that age where it was more vocational, and your classes would be all ages.
I love that.
Less of a social construct. Yeah. But I also think that Australian culture is so much more laxed and, you know, relaxed that it isn't as much of a social construct, because it's just, you know, nobody's out to like go get That was hilarious. In Australia, no one's out to go get wasted. I just mean it's not, it's not like the 4 years of college that like everyone waits for as an American.
There's like an interesting concept. I don't know if you've ever heard of like the Prussian education system, but America, so in the 1900s, the early 1900s, when America was like really starting the Industrial Revolution, that was when a lot of the school system was developed, and they modeled it after the Prussian education system.
Wow.
And so in Prussia, their education system was started during the beginning of a war, and it was created to produce soldiers. So the whole format was around like teaching kids how to take orders. And America took that and they reformatted it to teach kids how to take orders in like an industrial, in a work setting.
Yes.
But it's like interesting because now we're not really in that industrial economy anymore. And yet the push is still go to college, work 9 to 5, but there's so many other things out there, which is really kind of cool. I try to bring exposure to that on this podcast of just like, look at all these different paths out there. And like college, like you said, it's not going anywhere. You can always come back to it. You can go to college at 30 if you want.
Yeah. It's funny that you keep tying back into the next thing I want to say, because I was going to say Australia, the three things: American junior year being a normalcy, and then so people are just there for that semester, but usually that's much more organized because they have a place to go. It's much more puppeteer, what's marionetted, but that Australia and then Israel, which is what the next thing you just said is exactly about. Australia has a gap year that's a whole year, and is then you go to like even though it's not as structured, like I was just saying, the one social construct they do have is to leave Australia.
Okay.
Because it's really expensive to leave Australia. So you do the whole world, as much of the world as you can before coming home. And a lot of people do it in groups. Like, do you want to do gap year together? Do you that kind of thing? I think there's a lot of young mentality that's where I say not growing up. Yeah.
Because there's like this, there's a study, and it was basically, I don't remember the years or anything. I'd have to find it. Maybe I'll find it and link it. But it was talking about how kids today are several years like mentally younger, because they don't have to move out as soon. They don't have to like jump into the workforce. They have this phase of like 4 years where they kind of just like party. They can kind of just not have the responsibilities. And I think in some ways like that can be detrimental. It's also interesting though, because life expectancies are longer, and there's a lot of differences. So it's interesting to kind of like observe and like I wonder how it's going to play out long term, because I do think there's like a value in having a lot of like you had like independence at a young age, maybe moving out younger than, I know people that are much older than me, and they just don't have the sense of urgency to like kind of focus their life on something. And I think it's not a tangible thing of like, oh, you have to move out by this age, or you have to follow this career or make this amount of money. I think it's more of just like, you have to have something you're passionate about, and you have to have something that you're excited about.
And I also think as far as socials go, like posting and stuff, or channels, I think a lot of times I want to phrase this well, that it now seems like people really focus, borderline obsess with so many hours of the day, because I know that the content now is focused on the opposite of perfectionism, but that actually I'm way too perfectionist about it. It keeps me from posting a lot of the things that are on my phone. I have 100,000, 101,000, whatever. Yeah. And I'm like, but now, like, anyway, we don't even need to get into my OCD. You never know, it could blow up.
But just a side tangent, the reels I've posted with the least amount of time put in are the ones I've got. Like I had a reel that I spent maybe 10 minutes on, and it had like 1.5 million.
That's amazing.
Like, there's ones that I spent an hour on. It was like so frustrating, because some of them I was a perfectionist about, and those did not blow up. And then the one that I'm like, I spent no time on this, it blows up.
I feel like that must have been TikTok, no?
It was Instagram, actually.
It was Instagram?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, so many of them are hobbies, like things you couldn't otherwise make money on in the world. Yeah. So if Instagram were to be discontinued like that, or if, anything, like they wouldn't be able to translate that into a practical sphere. So a lot of people are no longer going into trades, or a lot of people like, I don't know, I don't mean to make these sweeping claims that I can't back up, but in my observation, kind of observation of how things are going, people would rather stay wherever is most convenient and just do that thing. Or whatever it is, like focus on that thing. I guess all I mean to say, not to say you can do a lot of it from a couch or something, but
it's true though. You can monetize a lot of things that you couldn't monetize.
Well, and I'm just trying to come up with for myself the reason behind something that I feel I'm noticing is that the economy is really changing. Like there's not available economy these years. Like obviously 2020 is what it was, but like coming back, I don't know. Like it's things are unaffordable for a lot of people. Like, you know, obviously real estate keeps going while wages never reflect it.
Yeah,
but like rents in New York City, like people are, it's just becoming unsustainable in a way that's like, well, I don't know, like the mom and pop shops obviously closing because of Amazon, like so many aspects. But I just think that the churn of the industrial economy is just becoming different, and it'll be interesting, I think, to see
100%
how things change around it to keep up with it, or like things are unsustainable. Like
one thing I find exciting, and maybe it's just my bias because of the people I surround myself with, but I've noticed, and I've worked with college kids now for the last like 6 to 8 months. I'm not working for that job anymore, but I was working specifically with college students, and I noticed like in that age group of like 17 to like 20, 21, there's a lot more kids that are like starting businesses. They're looking at, they're doing like their own thing while also like, you know, working a job or studying or whatever, but they're starting to kind of like test the waters of like, oh, maybe there's something else out there. And I think it's so exciting because I think I think the more entrepreneurs you have in an economy, the better. Like the more small business owners and the more people that are kind of just putting their own value out there and like creating a market. And obviously it's harder right now with the economy, but like, I think there's also like all of these opportunities that are kind of hidden by like the inflation and stuff, because like to what you were saying, the economy's definitely shifted to from like what it was in probably the 1900s. It was very much about like physical products and like manufacturing, and now it's like information products and these intangible goods that people are buying, like a Netflix subscription.
Right.
You're just getting pixels on a screen for that, you know, like. Yeah. So, but like those NFTs, are the products.
You know, NFTs.
Yeah, like I don't even understand.
Yeah, my brother is teaching AI in the art world in Japan in the next couple of weeks.
So what is that? Is that like creating art through AI?
New York Times and stuff has done an article on him, and New Yorker and all kinds of things. But because he found so much comedy before it was as popular, like before you would see on your Instagram feed a ton of AI like generated images. You can always tell because the skin is so clean. But that before that came out, he was kind of in that realm, and he's a photographer, fashion photographer. Like, so my brother's a fashion photographer, and AI he found very humorous. Like the Christmas before that stuff all rolled out, he was just sitting here, just giving it prompts and seeing how funny he could make the image. Like like, I mean, I'm not going to come up with an example. I should, but like brain's not there, but just such comedy of the prompts, the 3 or 4 things you can feed it, and it pops out with an image. You're like, this is insane, you know, whatever it is.
What would you say that
people... And he published them and had an exhibit and all these things.
So your brother's like into like the creation side of AI, which is like super cool to me. And I have no idea how it works. So I can't even pretend to like even have a clue about what he does. But like, I feel like there's 2 sides of like people about AI. There's like the reaction of
that's
like,
what he's teaching.
There's the reaction of people that are like, oh, AI is coming for our jobs. AI is terrible.
Totally.
And then there's the people that are like, AI is a tool and we're going to use it for
I almost want to say, so because I haven't perfected the summary, I think the idea is really, you know, it's like when the internet came around. It was hard to switch from bookstores to whatever. You just
people
keep
are really
evolving
threatened by change.
Well, and also just that, God, he says it so well. My favorite part of it, I'm going to say, just look him up and read about it, but about the people who are complaining about it. He has an interesting take on not to stereotype them, but on a lot of the sociological and maybe career-wise aspects of people who are complaining about it and why, and also like an offering to them of like, what about this, you know, way of thinking, but that he also is just like, it's hilarious. Like, use it for, like, I'm playing with this toolbox. That's funny. Just, like, fun. You know? Yeah. So, and just to, you know, instead of trying to hide that it's AI, like, just be like, this is AI, you know?
Right. Like, just be like open and honest about it.
And I think, and obviously the things that are taking over admin, or like, you know, at least SAG, Screen Actors Guild, you know, somewhat triumphed. If people could, of course, sneak it, but like triumphed, hopefully, there's a SAG officer on every shoot that would then see it through that a SAG actor can't be, they can't take your likeness without paying for each time and paying for a certain fee.
Interesting.
Because that was the, you know, you can create an actor who's passed away, you know, and like the, you know, put it in their estate. I mean, everyone should get compensated for their likeness. And so background actors are worried because you can just create the background, all these things. But yeah.
I heard this entrepreneur tell a story, and I thought it was such a cool way to use AI. He was saying how he told each of his employees, try and get so good with AI that you can replace your job. And the people that do the best, you replace your job. You've also shown me how valuable you are because you understand both what your job requires and how to use modern technology. And so obviously you're that much more valuable to me. You're not going to lose your job because you just showed me you could replace it.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really cool because it's true. Like the better you are with modern technology, the more valuable you are to your employer. So I think instead of running away and like worrying about how it's going to take your job, just embrace it and learn it, and that'll increase your value because it's not going away. We're not like, as much as some people might want, like AI is just going to continue to get better. I
mean,
it might be scary, but it's probably going to continue in that direction indefinitely. So, but back to your story. So after college, I know we kind of bounced around a lot, but I'm curious how you ended up like in New York too.
Okay, cool.
Like,
I'll do some funnies that people think are funny. Like, I was in Peru. I got lost in the jungle in a real way. I was found by this woman named Tota, who's the first of 14 wives of the
Your
Rio
stories are
Shiripuna
crazy
tribe.
to the point that I'm like, how did you actually live these all of these stories and make it here?
How am I alive? Yeah. So not sure. So I got lost in the Amazon. Then I took because of canoe tripping. Yeah.
It was canoe tripping.
It's funny that I never did like a gringa, like a tour for like tourists, except for the one. I was like, I should probably not go into the jungle like with my friend. Like I should do something we pay for. And then they had to work, whatever, they dropped out, and I was like, okay, I'll just go. I'm going to go on this trip. I've got my North Face, which was like, you end up not ever using it. It's for like German tourists to be all decked out, like in the city, like you're going to go to a mountain, I went with this tour and everybody was like pretty slow. They had like different boats. And I was like, oh, can I request that canoe? Like, I'd love to paddle that. And so I was in a canoe, which is my summer camp day. I'm a paddler. So I was paddling and then I got ahead of them and then I couldn't see them. And I was like, wait a minute, did they get ahead of me? Because there was like some reeds that I was like, wait, and I went this way and I didn't see anybody again. Oh, no. So I must have been ahead of them and they must have gone this way. It looked really obvious that you should go this way because I remember, obviously I rethought it 9,000 times, but there was like a little tributary. So, and I was getting to the point where I was like, I'm going to have to sleep in this canoe. Like, how should I cover myself? Like,
and
what do I have?
The Amazon rainforest?
Yeah. Near Coca, which is a small town in Ecuador. Another funny bit is that you have to have rain boots in the Amazon because there's so much going on down there. So, and I speak Spanish. I don't speak Quechua, which is like the native language in the jungle. So my Spanish, I don't know what they were like angry at the white girl. And I asked for, Coca sells, it's like a gateway town to the Amazon. So they sell things like little things you would need. And I was buying boots and she went like, oh, but you have to hang them upside down because also there's all these creepy crawlers, like hang your boots upside down. There are these little racks where this tour was going to stay every place. And, which is so, souped up to me, like, oh, we're not sleeping in like tents, like great. So, and she goes to the back for mine and just hands me this pair of boots and I put my foot in and it just filled with cockroaches, like absolutely filled.
Oh, jeez.
Absolutely.
This is before
filled.
the
and I mean, of course I was screaming and then I just laughed and I was like, you got me. Like yeah, God. Totally.
She knew?
No, yeah, she just was like playing a prank. It was
terrible.
It was very funny. But so
that was before the canoe trip?
Yeah, that was leading into this disaster I mean, I can't call it a disaster because it was like this phenomenal thing because Tota came, she saw me and I was like, oh my God, there's a person, like, this is nuts. This is like almost sundown. And I'm glad it was much earlier in the day that this happened. But, and we had no common language and I actually don't know I kind of have an idea, but we had no common language. Like they didn't speak Quechua, like anyway, but I was there for like almost a week. And then, I mean, there's really not more to the story other than like, holy shit, I lived with a tribe,
Wait, so when she found you,
but I had like a stupid North Face jacket and stuff.
Did she bring you back to where you were staying originally?
Yeah. And it's straight up tribe. The movies get it right. Like
what
exactly
was that like
the huts and like everything.
Wow.
There were the living huts with like, there were hammock beds.
Do they have like
fire pits?
Do they have technology there?
No, absolutely. absolutely not.
Wow.
I felt, like shit. I didn't mean to bring myself here. The kids were really interested in like my rings and like my North Face. And you're just like, man, I don't know. You didn't need this. You know what I mean? Like what am I doing here? I don't know. Which is, I don't know, a little bit also ridiculous, like to assume that they would then want things I have. Like, I don't know if I mean it like that. It just was
like, sometimes those are the happiest people in the world. It's just like
such
a simple life.
It just was definitely like something I get to talk about as opposed, it just otherwise was like, man, this girl got lost. Like, I don't know. Yeah. I had an incredible week.
So then like, what was it that brought you to New York? Was it the acting?
So I then had, between then and then, I lived in so many places, but I think LA, I didn't think I would ever leave. I ended up, after Olympia, I went to Philadelphia. Then I just was like, oh, I'll launch my acting career, et cetera. And then I just like, it didn't focus at all. I've always hosted. I host a lot, and I host pretty major dinners. The womensdinner.com. So funny. Don't look until I update it. Womensdinner.com. I love that I own womensdinner.com. But I go to a theater conference in Alaska most summers that Edward Albee and Arthur Miller started. It's called the Valdez Theater Conference. Used to be called the Last Frontier Theater Conference. I think it just changed. But it's legit. Edward Albee, Arthur Miller. It's like, it's in its maybe 25th, 30th year, and it's like Sundance, but for new play readings. A lot of them that I'm like, turn this into a movie. And for actors, it's really fun because you get like a 10 a.m., a 2 p.m., for a week. I was just mentioning the dinners is that I was at an Alaska, one of the first few Alaska conferences back when, and I was coming back and my friends wanted to plan a dinner. And of course I just had a breakup because we know me and boys at this point. And they were like, surprise party for Annie because she's getting home on her birthday. Like, should we invite Kevin and his friends or no? And they were like, I know, we'll just make it girls only. that will like clear that right up. And I'm a major party host. I grew up that way. My house growing up was like the house, My mom also needs that as her identity. So, and it was 30 girls came and it was huge and major, and we took over at an incredible house. I have such house luck. That became Women's Dinner because we were like, wow, that's, usually a lot of dude things in Los Angeles, lots of filming and all this stuff. So Women's Dinner has just had its 12th anniversary, and the biggest one was 75 women. My mom cooked in a wok for all of them in 1 hour. And the smallest was maybe like 10 in my Williamsburg backyard, but I used to do them in LA and New York, which is what you're asking me. I'll get there. So anyway, something about being known for hosting. I don't know. I just ended up being too like social or like mom of a group or like something where I just didn't focus myself. And then I started making money on Airbnb.
How did that start?
So
you just bought a property?
God, no. I now own a cabin in the Catskills, but that is equally insane as to how that happened. And I had this beautiful cabin and in West Hollywood. And this was like the beginning of Airbnb. So I was one of their first, was featured in all these things. And
you were featured?
Yeah, tons. Yeah. It was
cool.
This major Airbnb very early on of Airbnb. So, and it was called the Charlie Chaplin Cottage. I think you can kind of still find it online, it just paid me to be gone. Do you know what I mean? It was like,
how did you find Airbnb?
Somebody suggested it to me when it opened.
Okay.
When it was started.
Because that's like the infancy of Airbnb.
Yeah. And somebody was like, Annie, this is so for you because you jump around a lot. So I did that. And it was because I was going to film in Connecticut. I was playing a Croatian Rastafarian white woman with dreads. It was very funny. So I drove to Connecticut, of course, as one does from Los Angeles, drove to Connecticut. And then, because you can visit people along the way. I mean, I was, of course, going to make a couple weeks out of it. So, I mean, I almost don't know how better to say other than the fear-based thing as to why I didn't get an agent when I didn't. But I think that was a lot of that.
People like, and I definitely like have found this with like things that I say I want to do, be a public speaker or something. Sometimes like the hesitation is just that like in your mind, like you were saying, like you know what you're capable of. Yeah. And if you're anything like me, like you have very high standards for yourself. It's so to have, because you said like you're a perfectionist. Like, so to put anything else that's less than perfect out there, you're letting yourself down. Even if to the world, you're perfect.
Totally.
But in your heart, if you could have done better. And I think that's like something that can be a good thing, and it can also be a terrible thing if it stops you from doing what you want to do.
Is imposter syndrome overused?
That's a really I've heard a few people talking about that.
I think it's overused. To me, it's overused. But
imposter
it's
syndrome,
basically when you're so in something that you can't see from the outside that you are that thing. Like on the inside, you think you're not good enough because you're like, essentially your colleagues are this top, you look at whomever is above you as that thing. And so you must not be. And to everyone else, they're like, are you kidding? Of course you're that thing. You know what I mean? Where you're like, no, but I'm not. That you feel you're an imposter when everybody else views you as accurately as that thing.
I think it's a common trait, like in high achievers, to have that kind of like high standard for yourself and for others. And I think in a lot of ways it can be a good thing. Just like we were saying, like to the degree that it can't hold you back, but it can motivate you to prepare and kind of put that extra mile in that most people wouldn't. So I think it can create that slight edge that you need to really be successful in anything. Because I know, like for me, that's something even like with like starting a business or like putting out content. Like I had to get over that and like allow myself to be imperfect. But I also use it as a tool to be like, you know what, like I'm going to stay up, till 2 a.m. and I'm going to edit this and I'm going to get it how I actually want it. Or as close as possible. But it is kind of like this game of like, it's always unachievable to like really.
There are therapies out there for it and I just need to give one a shot.
But totally. But no, I do think it's a good thing. So instead of like going full in on the acting yourself, you started managing.
Well, I started casting in 2010. I mean, I think I just know a lot of people. I collect
like the
people and I've been a lot of places. So, and people are always like, do you know someone who's 4 feet tall with one brown eye and one blue eye? And I'd be like, we are 3, and I was like, I should just get
So you just had the network to already kind of
and I love directing. I love being a director. I love, directing a room. I think I do a good job of making everybody feel welcome and valued, and I like being in charge in that way. And so casting, I wouldn't say it really took off in a way that, like, I never invested myself in it. So I never had staff of my own. I had like a made up like Lisa at AnnieMcCainCasting.com, Annie at AnnieMcCainCasting.com, whatever. But I also make websites. I'm crazy about websites. Again, the editing.
You have such a diverse.
But so
it's
what
all
it's
creative,
good
though.
to do.
That's the common trait in all of your skills.
My hands and eyes and it's like I can't not. But again, is that if you want to feel legit in anything you might be coming up with, this is the opposite of imposter syndrome. But is just learn how to use. I mean, Wix I find the easiest, better than Squarespace. I recommend GoDaddy for the actual domain, and then you can point it, if you decide to not pay for a thing, you can point it to the free, wix.com/bop. Just get your .com you want, not within Wix, and you can point. I know that might sound really in the weeds.
So I use GoDaddy also, and it's like reoccurring, right? Like you pay yearly for each.
You pay yearly. It's like $14 at the most for something that's not popular. If you want like somehow womensdinner.com, I got really early, so who knows? But things that are really
it's funny you say that because I was looking at domain names last night.
Like $3,000.
I was one that was like $60,000.
Yeah, that's
and
then
there's one that had an unlisted price, and I was like, what do I have to lose? So I emailed them and I like made them an offer. It was like less than $1,000 because I was just like, I'm not gonna. Who knows? And I also just wasn't really that interested. But I was like, let me see. And they emailed me back and they just said, good luck finding a different. I was like, okay.
But you can get really clever. I mean, there's a lot of put your marketing brain on in all the directions that are required there. And I was just going to say that if you wake up in the morning and have an idea, make yourself a website for it and give yourself a business address, like, Annie at mynewidea.com. And those are $6 a month. So maybe only do it for the ones that you might get serious about. But it's been the opposite of imposter syndrome for me. It feels like the social equivalent of calling something, making something an LLC or something. Yeah. And then like the next step down is like Annie new idea at gmail.com. And you're like, homemade. But, and Wix is great. And I just, because I have like 3 or 4 of them that I regret not doing this for, they're going to market a domain that goes along with it for free. You just start paying next year. But if you do it within the same business, like within Wix.com, they're going to bait you to continue paying for that website every year, or it's going to take the domain away and make it, whatever it is, nonsense domain. And you can't use the domain until you repay. Whereas GoDaddy, you can point to whatever domain.
Right.
So you can let it go freebie if you want. Like women's dinner, I haven't paid for in, 5 years, but I have womensdinner.com on GoDaddy, so that works. That's literally my like business advice. Like if you want to make a lot of money, maybe get a tax ID through LLC, but otherwise as a business, just do that. And I have like 14 websites for all the little things I do. Interior design is theagrarianhome.com. Okay. Everybody visit it, please. Rent our properties, or I do like FaceTime.
And you've done some really cool, like different, like this Airbnb versus what you showed me in upstate, like so different. But like, I remember seeing this when like you first met me, and it's so different from like what it was then. So, like,
that is an obsession. Design. Maybe that is the real reason with the acting stuff is I will forget everything else that's going on when like I have a new space, like a new project. And I moved so often into these incredible places, one after the next, and they were always just like it was this miracle. And I mean, maybe when you're that obsessed with something, it's not a miracle. You're like, I made this happen. But interior design eats my whole mind. Like I'd be late to film sets for like moving this one lamp like 5 inches that way, and then like
kind of makes sense though. If you're talking about web design, I think even acting, like there's an element of like design to all of the things that you've done. So it does all tie together. It makes sense. I'm curious,
guys.
I'm curious what would you tell to like people maybe like looking to get into the performing arts, or looking just to kind of like freelance, maybe like step away from the traditional 9-to-5 life, because obviously you've done a lot of different things where you are your own boss. What would you say is like a piece of advice in just like getting started? Obviously the website, that's something, but
sure,
like in the networking side of things.
I don't think websites for networking are I feel like you would already know this, even though she was being generous to what I'd already said, but that's for like if you want to get taken seriously as a trade, I think, like as an office or a trade, that.com. But I think otherwise, again, as you know, like just having media, just like putting media there, because the first thing everybody, as a casting director too, the first thing everybody does is look you up.
Look
if you're going, you meet somebody new, you're hire something from, everybody looks at your social, and that's maybe intimidating, because a lot of times as an actor, for instance, you'd be like, not everybody's cut out for that. Like, actually, I just want to audition for you. I want you to tell me what's up, and I can do that. I don't want to be judged on my acting based on my self-created content. I mean, a lot of that can be that, but that's specific to acting.
It's a new, I've heard now people reference like Instagram as a new business card. So it really is like, and like I work with a lot of like small businesses in the area to like help them build their social influence. And it's like, it's become like a huge source of leads. Whereas like 15, 20 years ago, you had to pay a lot of money to be seen in front of that size audience.
That amount of people.
You don't pay to post. It's very different.
When that doesn't work, because you're kind of betting on a who knows with like social media to gain more audience. That like I'm kind of want to go old school again, and just like I need to start advertising some of the listings, because Airbnb's had a rocky time in general for the first time ever. It's like, wow, I always wanted to be just like this thing I secretly did, and now I'm having to be like, I'm an interior designer. Theagrarianhome.com. I need to where if I'd been doing that all along, like I would have an email list of 10,000 people since 2012 who this is the best thing ever, all this praise I would get, that I was kind of like, cool, I don't care, I just want to be in this world, and I'm secretly in this world, strangers sleeping in my beds, or but it's old school email list. Like I realize everybody gets targeted by every company on email. You buy one thing and you're on that company's email list, and like, for as obnoxious as it is, still probably like 2 times a month that works on me, And I think it's invaluable to keep the people who do know you on a on something that isn't trusted to the universe like that, So old school email list where, people can unsubscribe. Just start your, tiny letter, MailChimp. MailChimp's kind of older, but tiny letter works a lot for people.
I also feel like
to just be able to make announcements to people. Yeah.
I think one thing, I don't know if you've done this before, but like on Instagram and TikTok, I think you could get a lot of leads if you just did like lifestyle videos. Like maybe like a 30-second clip of you like before and after of a room. Like design this room with me, or clean up with me after this Airbnb stay, or like just showing you hosting a party. Because I feel like now the way people like build trust with a business is like, the way people do business now is based on trust, and it's based on personality. And because everything's advertised on social media, people are able to go on there and really get to know business owners. Like there's so many Airbnb hosts on Instagram that I've seen, and they just do like a walkthrough, or
that's funny.
they'll do the same video like 10 times a week, but it's like that
Yeah.
brings in new people that are like, oh my gosh, I never like
Yeah.
would have thought
Yeah.
of staying there now, but I just love her personality. She seems so happy. I'm gonna go stay in her Airbnb. And so I think that could be like a really good, bring some traffic.
Rock and roll. Yeah.
Yeah. That's it.
Well, and I want to think of other things about starting one's own business. I mean, I don't know if there's a way to come up with a passive income stream, you know, whatever that, obviously for me, that was Airbnb.
Yeah.
And there are so many, and they're individualized, you know, but some way to come up with an amount of time where you don't need to be making daily money.
Leverage.
And if you do then need to make daily money, I think something that has been harder for me to redirect with is that, I mean, I still have people at any age wait tables, but in Manhattan, it's quite respected. Not that it's not respected everywhere, but like, you know,
in the city.
friends, are still waiting tables. But it's clever to do that if you need to make money daily or weekly, to do something you legit don't care about, so that when you leave it, it's completely left. It doesn't consume your free time to start something different or to work in something different.
Right.
And that's hard for me. I've not ever been good at that, because Airbnb also the same, but I can't not care about it. It's, you know, it's my places, it's my design, like, et cetera. And it is, you know, time consuming too.
I think that's the bottleneck for like a lot of businesses is like, because every entrepreneur, like you can listen to entrepreneurial podcasts. I actually made a reel about this yesterday, talking about how like you want to be working on the business, not in the business, and, you know, make it passive, not active. But it's like, okay, but like starting a business has to be active by default, by nature. You have to actively build a business before you can step back and like outsource it. So I'm in the active phase of building my business, but I thought it was like a really interesting observation, because I think they kind of leave that step out sometimes. And it is the bottleneck for a lot of small entrepreneurs to go from active to then release and control, especially as a perfectionist, because you know, no one's going to do it as good as you. Yeah. And so it kind of just becomes this battle of just accepting that. Yeah. Like, it's not going to be as good as if I had designed this room or if I had done this or that.
For sure.
But I think it is like, that's the way you scale. Yeah. You know, leveraging that time.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Yes.
I think, but what you said too, like about passive income, that's crucial. One thing I think people are also scared of, I keep saying like one thing, there's a lot of things.
Rock and roll.
One of them, I think, is rejection. So people are very scared of like rejection and getting judged, which is funny to me, because it's like, people don't really care what you do, and none of them are going to remember you in a decade.
The you know, the truth about whether or not, you know, the truth about what people are thinking about you is that they aren't.
They aren't. They really aren't.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, we're all going to die. Not to be morbid, but in 100 years, we're not going to be here. And honestly, who cares? Like, when you're on your deathbed, you're not going to have regrets. Like, oh, I wish that person had thought better. Like, you're not going to care. You're just going to care if you would like.
It's a perfect way to end up the thing on perfectionism. Like,
yeah. But I'm like, your perspective being in the acting world, there's a lot of rejection in that world.
Oh, it's why I don't have an agent yet. Look at me. Yeah, totally.
So like, did that kind of build like more of like a tough, you know, skin for you of just rejection proof?
So I'm going to go with no. I'm going to go with that. I need that advice because I haven't, you know, to wait till you're asked is such an egoic way to be, which is really just like, oh, I'm terrified of auditioning myself because I wouldn't, you know what I mean? Yeah. And coaching other actors or coaching auditions, to me, or I do accent coaching and stuff, you know, it makes me feel empowered. Whereas auditioning myself, you know, technically should make one feel empowered. That's the ideal way to audition and submit, but
it's more personal.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And then also throwing casting in there. And whenever I'm a casting director, the amount of, not to make this worse for anyone else, but like horrible auditions that you see is like, oh man, that's really getting in there. You know what I mean? Like yes, sort of like ups my ego, but then also like, you know, but it's just time. I just have so much footage. I'm like, you know, intimidated to make the reel or what have you. And I just need to I'm 40 guys, let it go.
I was listening to this guy, Alex Ramosi, yesterday talk about like perfectionism and procrastination, and like, you just make yourself live through like the pain of it twice. And like the amount of time
the work you put in and then
did it. And then like the thinking through the work. Like if you just did it when you had the idea. And so he has this concept of like, cut out the morning routines, cut out all like meditation, all. He's very like anti like routine. Yeah. He's very just like, get the work done. Do what matters. And to him it's very black and white, but I've found like a lot of value in that, because he'll be like, in the morning, like what he does is at whatever time he gets to, like 6 a.m. or whatever, he just works for 6 hours or I forget what it is, but he works for like I think when he was writing his book, he was writing for 6 hours. When he was practicing, he's the guy that did the presentation. He was presenting for 6 hours, and he just does the hard work first thing in the morning.
Wow.
And then it allows him to get the more creative juices flowing like later in the day, because he's done the work that needs doing early on. Yeah. And I think that's like kind of interesting, because a lot of people get so caught up in like this routine. I need to walk for 30 minutes and then meditate for an hour and then do this and drink my tea. And then it's like, okay, now it's 12 p.m. I can work. But it's like, now you're not even as motivated as you were.
Totally.
So
I write like crazy. I take a ton of photos, ton of video, I write all the time. And I was partnered this is how I came to New York, because I was partnered for a long time to a poet and a musician. He was music directing a show that I was in Los Angeles, and there we went. He was a New Yorker, so that's how I got here.
Gotcha. Okay.
But that was 2013.
So that was a move inspired by work.
Back and forth. Yeah, we'll call it that. And then back and forth until 2017, I let go of LA. But there was a really intense routine. He had he had masters in poetry, masters in classical guitar, very academic. So there was like an hour out, it was very regimented. And I was like, I thought like, why can't I do that? Like and maybe I could, I actually just never succeeded in fully trying, but that I'm so like, I wake up with a racing mind, and you're like, I need the fact that it's on my phone is like paragraphs and paragraphs. And if I were to override the racing mind and go do something else, I'm not sure I trust that I could get back those ideas I had. And like, a lot of that stuff is like, you think it's genius, and then you look back and you're like, what? But I don't know, once in a while you're like, oh wow, that was a perfect poem or something. That's exactly how that should have gotten at, whatever it is. And I'm going to publish poetry this year. I'm excited. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know if I could do a routine like that, but I know that there'd be a sense of calm that would happen for me, because the racing stuff, like it controls me. Yeah. I don't control it. So when you want to not control it, you want to use it, then like go forth. But a lot of times it shouldn't control me. You know what I mean?
Final question.
Yeah.
So now, and let me know if I'm missing anything. We've talked about music,
no problem. Yeah.
Poetry, acting, Airbnbs.
We'll call it interior design.
Dance, interior design.
I want to do that so much more.
Yeah. So out of all those things, do you ever see yourself like going full in on just one of them and just pursuing acting or just pursuing poetry?
Yes. I most like in my dreams for sure acting. But I mean, I could be just happy doing interior design, but not Airbnb anymore. I want to do interior design like for people, and just the creative side, not the
logistics.
No, I would want like a team. So, or people who bring things, whatever that is. So creative interior design or directing of that, or acting and directing like in media. In the meantime, I'm becoming a talent manager, because my friend in LA, who has a steeped talent management company, has asked that I be her New York office. And I said, as long as I can have my own agent and manager to submit me, because it's otherwise illegal. You have to sign off that you won't get the breakdowns for roles and do them for you. So I had to sign that legal paperwork. So this and that are separate. And it's almost the motivation, actually, for me to finally get an agent.
Wow.
So I think acting and interior design
are
the main, because I feel like the universe says all the things where you're supposed to just do the one because that's what you want to do. You know what I mean?
I think you do have to do a couple things to really find what it is you want to do long term. So I think a lot of people say like you have to just do one thing. But you have to start off doing a few things to figure out what is that one thing.
And the rest of them are hobbies. Like I will never stop writing. I don't know how to stop. Publishing a book, there's structured time that I could put into that. And I'm not that interested in
it's not worth it.
I just want to publish my own stuff.
Yeah.
Even the writing articles is fun. But
I love that.
So yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And I think even the most successful people that say you have to do one thing, usually they're also authors. Yeah. They're running a business. They're making content. It's like, well, you're actually doing a few things here. So I think there's so much more time than people think there is. If you are focused on a few things, you can be great at more than one thing.
Yeah. Well, and maybe the actual conclusion is I would never turn down acting to interior design. I would turn down interior design.
So you know your priorities.
But they're both my heart. Yeah.
That's crucial. So you have the priority of the acting. And then you have you also have focus on other things, but at the end of the day,
which I feel like most people say about acting, but they're like in their 20s. I just haven't bit the bullet, Right. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being on.
God,
I feel like there were so many different things we covered, so many
Yeah.
different things people can learn from
Yeah.
that. So that was awesome.
Yeah.